because The Sims is obviously so focused on families and people and aspirations and human things, it gave me ways to understand the world that I was living in that I didn't have before.
Hello and welcome to the Playlist Podcast. I'm Benjamin Dorr, and today I'm chatting with game designer Penelope Murphy. Penny and I talk about Pokémon, parkour, and play. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Were you born in Melbourne, Pen?
No. I moved to Melbourne when I wanted to study games because I knew that games were better in Melbourne, that there was more of a game dev community here. I was born in Canberra, which is where I grew up. It's kind of judgy maybe, but I remember going to the campus of, at the time, like the one place that taught games in Canberra and looking around and being like, oh no, like I can't do this. I need to go to like the big city smoke, you know?
My memories of Canberra were going to the Greater Union Cinema, and this is probably like 15 years ago, but the Greater Union Cinema was like stuck in time, and the carpet and the design of it was like no other cinema I'd been to. And I think there are elements of Canberra that feel trapped in like an interdimensional pocket where they have not moved at the kind of rate that other places have. But that also makes Canberra special because you can go there and have a very unique experience. And I think given the nature of the city, it's a weird place, but it's kind of a special place.
I agree. I'm one of the few people that love Canberra. Except, again, it is every now and again, I think I got hit by like small town in different ways. Like most people would be like, oh, there's nothing to do here and it's boring. You know, I have to get out of here. But for me, I would do things like go to the university in the middle of, one of the main universities and see that it's covered in kangaroos. And then be like, no, this is such a, this is embarrassing. I want the fancy university experience they show me in American dramas. I need to get out of here.
I think we should just kind of dive right into it and talk about the first video game you ever played.
I remember playing a game called Monster Rancher for the first time, where the whole game is you get like a monster pet that you raise and do battles or whatever. And it was the first time we'd gotten this game, and it was so exciting. And I'm super young, and I'm like, wow, I've just been given this monster in this game. It's so cool. I obviously love it with my entire heart because just easily fall in love. And then at the time, I don't understand what the rating systems were like. A is top rank and an S tier is above that I didn't know that at the time. To me, A, because it comes first, would be bad. So the further you got into the alphabet would be, I don't know, probably be the harder ones. But also I probably didn't even know much of the alphabet. I don't know, I was super young. But I took my monster, I was immediately attached to it, went to go do a battle, went to an S tier battle because I didn't understand what was going on. And I didn't realize in this game, your monster could die if it took too much damage, but it would do it kind of slowly. Like my creature immediately gets blasted out of the sky by like a huge lightning blast from a fairy. It gets sent to hospital in the game. Time passes, and every week you check in on your creature to see if they've recovered yet, which it didn't. And then my creature just died immediately.
Did you have kind of an instinct early on that design was something that you wanted to explore in gaming? Or at what age did you go, I want to be a game designer? Or was that something that happened like far later, post-uni?
That's both. I remember being, again, in like kindergarten or year 1 or 2, and I was in love with games. At that time, I remember when everyone was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? My answer was like, I want to be a video game maker. But I remember being a kid and trying to think of like, all right, if I'm a video game maker, what game would I make? And then I couldn't think of anything. Like it was kind of like if you're an artist and it's like, what am I going to draw? And it's like, I don't know what to draw. And that freaked me out as a young kid. It was like, oh no, I can't be a video game maker if I don't know what to make.
Yeah.
So actually, I remember that really, weirdly enough, that demoralized me for years. And I then for the next 16 years or whatever, I kept changing about what do I want to be when I grow up. I don't know what I want to do. I'm going to try doing artist. At one point, I was like, maybe I should be a pilot. All kinds of
Interesting.
things. Mm. And it was only later through games again and babysitting for a kid. And she was looking at my sketchbook and she was like, oh, what's this? What's this drawing from? And I was like, oh, it's from a game. And she's like, what about this drawing? I was like, oh, it's also from a game. And then, we were playing on keyboard and I was like, oh, look, I can play this song. And she was like, cool, what's the song? And I was like, it's also from a game. Oh boy, maybe I should do something about the games.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting though? Like those through lines to where you end up in a career when you think back into those early formative moments of the things that you hold on to. Because I also think, people will go through an entire career and people have got, ideas they've had when they were teenagers or kids that kind of sit in them and then they're like, oh, that's the movie I really want to make, like the deep down thing that I protect. And, the same would go for video games and design.
Yeah, I think that's also what gave me a bit of insecurity about it in a way was I love games and wanted to be in games and I kind of knew that, but I never had that like, this is the game I'm going to make, like this is my magnum opus, this is the story I've been born to tell or and I think that made me feel like I didn't want it enough or I wasn't as like, maybe what it felt different from a lot of other creatives, and I wasn't sure what that meant. In a way, I never chose to do design. I chose to do a game design course specifically when I went to uni, but that was because I liked everything. I liked coding, I liked art, I liked writing, I liked, I didn't specifically like design. I couldn't pick. And that kind of continued. That's also, in a way, when I remember graduating, the course and being really kind of frustrated in a way that I still actually didn't understand what game design was. I'd been studying it for 3 years, but I still had no idea what design was. I had no idea what to expect if you got a job in design. Like, what do you actually do at this company? And I've talked to other designers about it who have also felt similar. Like, sometimes it can, for this role in particular, sometimes it can feel a bit ephemeral, especially when it's a lot of what you can do or need to understand is what everyone else does. But they know how to do those things better. So where was design in the end? And it took a few years to figure that out.
What was your first kind of real game design job? And how did this job change your preconceptions about what game design actually was in a professional environment?
My first job was as an intern at EA Fire Monkeys, working on The Sims Freeplay. And that definitely challenged my ideas of what it was like to be a designer in a professional space. I mean, first of all, again, I didn't really know what to expect as a designer. What actually surprised me the most at first was, I think this is an interesting thing that happens a lot to professionals and people, is if you know something, or sometimes if you're good at something, or you have a lot of experience in something, it's hard for you to understand those things as skills.
Yeah.
You kind of assume, or knowledge or experience, you kind of assume that everybody knows that thing. And so what's the point of saying it or sharing it or writing it down? And that's actually what shocked me a lot about design when I first started in this job, was so much of the job was writing things down that I felt were givens. It was obvious that, the table shouldn't go through the wall, or, or making like those small because again, it's an intern role and you're not making like huge decisions and designing big systems. A lot of it's just documentation or making decisions about, for example, I remember very clearly one of the things that really confused me at first was we had events where players could earn furniture, and one of the jobs of the designers on the team was to decide, of all the pieces of furniture that we have, which piece of furniture gets earned at which point. What's the most high value bit of furniture? Because you obviously kind of want the highest value stuff at the end, so people keep chasing it. And that really confused me because, again, it just felt like something that it didn't feel like a real job. Like, it felt like such an obvious, such an obvious thing of like, well, then you've clearly got the super bike or whatever. So I guess that goes at the end, and you put the little lampshade at the top. Like, why is this how does this work? Or how is this designed? And it took a long time to kind of start understanding a lot more over time that so much of a designer's role is to introduce clarity of, yes, anyone could decide that the super bike, I hate that was the example I used, the super bike goes at the end because that's the highest value item, but somebody needs to make the decision. In a way, it's the mental load or that mental work of making those decisions in advance, so it can be communicated to everybody and everyone can understand, yes, confirming it is at the end, so when people go to make it or implement it, they don't need to be making those decisions on the fly. And because of that, it means that those decisions can be made in advance in a thought out environment so that they match up with all of your goals. Whereas if you're, again, like, those decisions add up, and at first it's not obvious that that's the case, that if you don't make those decisions in advance, that you're actually asking people to do a lot more problem solving on the fly that gets in the way and starts getting chaotic.
Yeah.
Because, no one's working in alignment, everyone's kind of going everywhere. And that took me a long time to understand from that job.
What is your biggest game of shame, or the game that you started and you played and you stopped and you didn't go back to? Your biggest regret?
This is so embarrassing. It's funny because I genuinely do feel shame about it. And when I saw the question, I was like, oh no, I'm going to tell people I don't like that. My biggest game of shame is Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which is so embarrassing because I feel like I should have played it. I should love it. It should be like my favorite game. I was hyped for it to come out. I bought the collector's edition for however much money that was because I was so excited. Loved Breath of the Wild. But then when I got it, it's not even that the game was bad. It's just, I just wasn't interested. I played it for a bit and then was like, I just felt no desire to keep playing or to play it again. So I only played about an hour, which is the most embarrassing thing to me. Finals were coming up, and I knew if I didn't stop playing Breath of the Wild, I would fail all my assignments. So instead, I decided to finish the game, which was to beat Ganon, which isn't really finishing the game because there's so much content. But I knew my brain would understand that as, I won, it's done, we can move on. So I did that. And then I never played the game again. Ever. I bought the DLC because I loved the game. I was so excited. Never played it. Bought the expansion game. It's just, in my brain, this game is over. There's no going back. It's done.
I also have to admit that I started the game and I love Breath of the Wild, and I was excited for it, and I put a few hours into it. Obviously there was more to do and there was more creativity involved in the experience. But for some reason, I also just petered out my excitement. Like, do you have a theory from a design perspective as to why that might have been for you or people in general?
The only theory I have, and if I'm honest, I haven't thought more deeply about it, which now that I mention that also seems weird. I feel like I should figure it out. Was just that the hook at the beginning wasn't as strong. Like the beginning of Breath of the Wild to me was so amazing, and like stepping out of the cave for the first time and just having the possibilities open up, and it wasn't really tutorialized at first. It was just very like, it was absolutely stunning and such an amazing open to the game, with so much mystery and like what's going on. But in this one, it felt a bit more of a almost like yes, it introduces a new threat, but one that there wasn't any hint of before.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, and you did all this and you did amazing things and it's great, but oh no, new bad guy out of nowhere. And I think that's not as compelling. It's really hard to make that interesting because it's like the premise of Breath of the Wild is there's been like 100 years of, mystery and problem, and it's such a strong, it's almost like you're doing a fight, or it's a struggle of biblical proportions. There's so much there, but then all of a sudden it's kind of like, and I guess Monster of the Week, there's a guy there, yeah, have fun, I guess. And it's like, I guess. But yeah, it just doesn't nearly have as much of that narrative drive behind it.
Speaking of sequels and experiences, I really want to talk to you about Detective Pikachu, because I know you've got a very strong take on Detective Pikachu that I think the world needs to hear.
Yeah. Okay, I first of all freaking love Detective Pikachu, and I have many thoughts about Detective Pikachu and the movie. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Did you play the games before watching the movie?
I actually didn't, but I really want to. I remember when I first heard about it, and it just sounded so wacky, especially people were telling me that the voice of Pikachu was so like, I don't know if it's true or not, but like manly, and like that was so counter to obviously the normal voice of Pikachu from the show or something, which is so high pitched, and it just, I feel like I would love it. We've spoken before in the past about just kind of the love of a bit of a almost film noir, or like, to me, I really love that over the top detective genre.
Yeah.
For like, it was dark, I walked down an alley, and like the really like, and I wonder if Detective Pikachu the game has some of that. I'm interested.
It's a very weird departure for Pokemon to take, and Pokemon has done some weird stuff. And it's also a weird thing for Hollywood to adapt. Like, if you were going to make a Pokemon movie, wouldn't you just make a straight up Pokemon live action adaptation? Like,
it's there's been tons of anime. Choice.
Yeah.
Like, specifically Detective Pikachu instead of Pikachu. And I remember hearing that, like, they had a lot of this brand limitations. Like, I heard that they weren't, again, you may want to fact check it, but I heard they weren't allowed to do Pokemon battles specifically.
Oh, okay.
Like
with trainers and things like that.
Yeah. I think that was a brand thing, which is a bit, I don't remember why, but it means that a lot of the fights in it tend to be a bit more indirect.
Yeah.
Or a lot more, it's less like a traditional Pokemon battle of like the two trainers yelling, and a lot more like even the fight in the arena, if you've watched it, is, again, there's a lot less Pokemon battles than you'd expect.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much that's fascinating about Detective Pikachu to me. But
what is it about the film that kind of creates an emotional resonance with you?
So I thought about this a lot, because as you can even see from, my background, there's a lot of Pokemon up there. Why are there so many Pokemon when I don't even play a lot of Pokemon games anymore as an adult? It was very much, it's not so much a big part of my life right now. But I mentioned before that I'm a very nostalgic person. And one of the earliest games I can remember playing is Pokemon. And it was when I was very, very young as well. It was one of the earliest games. I remember playing Pokemon Red and having such a strong emotional attachment to these Pokemon and stuff. So like what I was talking about, Monster Rancher, but times 10, because there's so many Pokemon. And it consumed me as a child. I was all in. And I think what's so emotional about Detective Pikachu to me now, and just kind of Pokemon as a franchise, why even though I don't play the games anymore, I'm still so invested, is it's still there, Pokemon.
Yeah.
You know, like so much of my life has changed between being that young kid to now. But Pikachu is still around, being Pikachu. And as a franchise, it's almost like I see the Pokemon that was so comforting as a kid, and I'm still being celebrated and stuff, and that it almost feels like Pokemon is one of the, in a world of crazy things that happen all the time, Pokemon has been a constant throughout my entire life, and so it has become a source of comfort and joy beyond just the experience of playing the games, because it reminds me, it's almost like, it sounds really corny, but like a really old friend, because it's been there for so long.
Yeah.
And Detective Pikachu for me, especially when it came out, that was absolutely how I was feeling. Like seeing it portrayed in a live action movie for the first time, like absolutely blew my mind. And one of the things that hits me hardest when I watch it is just seeing Pokemon around in the world. Like, when it first shows you Rhyme City and it gives you like the establishing shots of people walking around, and there's just Pokemon just walking around or being birds, or, and seeing that. I remember as a kid, so many Pokemon memories or stories, and like my sister and I, we used to share a room, and every night, as I would fall asleep, the thing I wanted the absolute most in the world was to dream about Pokemon. It was like my goal. It was like a thing in my brain with capital letters. Like the dream was to have the Pokemon dream, and the Pokemon dream was to live in the world of Pokemon and to be there and walk around in it and see Pokemon and feel that in real life. And so seeing the movie and seeing it in real life just hit me at such a deep, like, wish fulfillment, but also like this small child who wants, there was nothing I wanted more in the world than to be in that world. And it just makes me bawl my eyes out.
Snorlax is 100% my favorite Pokemon, and I have owned a lot of Snorlax stuff. But my kids as well, like, love Pokemon. And they really have transcended, where people do have nostalgic memories to them, but they've been around for so long. And what I also find fascinating about Pokemon is that the core Pokemon game experience really has not changed over years and years and years, and you can still deliver Pokemon games, and it's essentially the same experience. Like, they're not changing that. And I find that fascinating, that the IP itself is so powerful that you don't have to reinvent the design of games to make it popular and successful.
Yeah. You hit at some really, really strong pillars so early on. And in my mind, like, some of the most fascinating evolutions of Pokemon as a franchise have either been Pokemon Go, which obviously was huge in and of its own right, but also recently-ish I've been playing Pokemon Legends, which is kind of like a real-time Pokemon battle, which is fascinating to me and really, really interesting from a design point of view for a lot of reasons. But it's really cool to see, there's the core concept and franchise, but then seeing what it looks like in these kind of other genres here and there, and getting some of that experimental, like Detective Pikachu.
Yeah.
What is that? That's wild.
I tried playing the Snorlax sleep app. It was a gamified sleep app with Snorlax at the center. It was bizarre. Like, I know they're trying to reward you for napping and things like that, but it was an interesting thing. And
it's
just
my childhood game persona, like, made real. The Snorlax game.
Yeah, there you go.
Sleep.
I want to talk about a different game, and this is kind of the biggest disappointment game, the one that you were so excited to play. And maybe we did cover this with Tears of the Kingdom, but that the game that really destroyed your love of a franchise or a character, that it was so bad.
Yep. For me, this is absolutely Fable 2, and destroying your love of a franchise. Yeah, I heard they were remastering or maybe re-releasing Fable 1, and I'm interested to see if I care because of how much Fable 2 made me hate the game.
Well, I think it's is it Playground Studios who make the Forza Horizon games are rebooting it from the ground up.
Ooh.
There was an Xbox Direct pretty recently, and it looks promising. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Please continue.
But again, there's a weird emotional journey I'm going on at the same time. For Fable 2, I loved that game so much. I had such a blast playing it. It was so fun. It was just, I don't know what it was about it, but it really hit my subconscious in a way. There was just, it isn't normally what I like about games in that I'm a huge scaredy cat. I can't play any horror. Maybe that's starting to change now. I'm getting more interested in horror as a genre. But with Fable 2, it had some elements that were actually quite spooky that really impacted me. Because I was so unused to any horror stuff, the impressions those horror moments made were actually really positive because it was like, whoa, I got so freaked out by that. And that was really fun. And it was, I guess, Fable 2 isn't a horror game. It's just, it was scary enough for me, but mild in reality that I could enjoy it. And I think that's what made me love the game so much. Just to start off, I can't be let down by the game unless I was invested in it, and I loved it. And there were a few things in it, I was having dreams about Fable 2, about these particular, it's not even something that's meant to be scary, the random collectible, in games when they're find 60 of the fairy or the korok that's hidden around the island. For them, they had gargoyles, but for me, they were just really scary for some reason. I found them really creepy. And so I had dreams about where I could hear them, and I have to find them, but it's really freaking me out, and where are they? And anyway, loved the game, but it does something towards the end of the game that so much of this game, the Fable franchise, is meant to be about making choices and making meaningful choices and watching the outcome of your choices unfold over time and so on. And whether or not they delivered on that promise is, I know that was one of the big letdowns for the franchise, where they over promised that a bit at the beginning, but it's still a core part of kind of what the game's about. It's about, making these choices between good or evil, or who do you want to be. And I was really invested in that. And, I had my character, and it was, I've expressed myself through this character and this narrative, and I'm making these choices that resonate with me. And near the end of Fable 2, there's a moment where there are some particular choices you have to make. And I'm trying not to give spoilers for a 20-year-old game. And it felt like with the choices that you had to make at the end of this game, it didn't feel like a real choice. It felt like after this entire game where my expectations had been set of I'm making these choices for, to make these choices about who I am and who I want to be. And then I am forced to make a decision, to make a choice, a very emotional choice to kind of not be who I want to be. It was I was forced in a way to make a decision, and doesn't force you, and that you literally can't choose anything else. But for, reasons, you have to do a particular thing if you want to be a certain thing,
Yeah. You're doing very well with not dropping spoilers. But
so I think it's not too vague at the same time. It's what is she talking about?
And you felt this choice with the design broke the illusion of control almost
In a
of your
way,
characters. Yeah.
yeah. And it just felt like it invalidated every decision I'd made or everything that I loved about the game I was invested in. Having to make such a big, strong choice that I hated the outcome of made me go from I'm loving this game and I'm having such an interesting emotional experience throughout this game to I feel genuinely kind of betrayed. And
Is this something that's kind of come up with other players? Like, I played Fable 1 and I have not played any of the other Fable games, but was this a common kind of opinion of players? Like, or was this something that was kind of uniquely, you felt unique about?
that's a really good question. And I feel like after this call, I'm going to go and like try and look up old Reddit threads or something. I'm really curious because I think so far I'm the only one to have had such a visceral reaction to this particular moment in the game. Um, and I don't know why. I don't know why this specifically hurt me so much, or like, maybe just something about my headspace at the time. I have no idea. But as far as I've heard, I don't think anyone else has had this reaction to it. Not to say that that's impossible. But yeah, I don't know. I want to find out.
But I think, it sounds like you felt the integrity of the experience was compromised. Would that
I
be a
think so.
fair?
That's a really
Yeah.
good way of putting it. And
Because,
it felt like it almost felt like a breaking of the fourth wall in a way where it an example my partner uses sometimes is something that made him check out of The Last of Us 2 or something was, you're fighting these humans and, it feels bad because they're humans and shouldn't we fight zombies or whatever. And at one point, the enemy can be disarmed and they're cowering and they beg you for mercy. They're like, please don't kill me. And it feels like, and I've had this happen in other games and it felt very similar in that it feels like, whoa, like, they're giving me a choice here. Like, all right, go run away. Like, you're begging me for mercy. I'm not going to kill you like that because that would make me a horrible human being. And then in the game, even if you let them go, they just start shooting at you again. They pick up a gun and combat regimes. You can't actually let them go. And that feels like the developers shoving, like, I don't know, it's like almost like they put the game down and they're like, no, you have to feel bad. Like, you are not allowed to not feel bad. I am kicking you in the guts right now and you can't do anything about it, but I'm going to pretend you can, but actually, nah, just eat it. And that sucks.
I think, The Last of Us Part 2, I like the scene you're referring to, and the intent, I think, of that is definitely to make you feel quite horrible.
Sometimes it just feels rude. Sometimes I get it as a dev, but
I think, because it's such an interactive, immersive medium, when you pull a narrative choice like that, it hits far differently than if you put it in a film or a TV series, because you are participating in that experience in a far different way. Because one of my kind of takeaways from 28 years later, the Boone Temple versus 28 years later is, to your point before, like, if there's people fighting zombies and there's violence, you can be like, oh, it's just a zombie. But in the Bone Temple, there's some really horrific violence of humans against humans, like not just graphic, but incredibly cruel. And so that's a film, and to have that kind of experience is one thing and you feel bad. But if it's in a video game and you were there present in that moment, trying to feel like you have agency to affect the story, it is a different level, I think, of responsibility from, delivering a narrative in that space that has to be considered. But there's been lots written about those games. And to your point, I think there is a responsibility there, I think, for designers and creators and narrative designers. What do you feel is the responsibility of a designer when it comes to agency and empowering the player versus manipulating them?
It feels like a wider question in games almost sometimes. I think the question becomes a lot more important depending on the type of game and the themes. Like on one side you have like dark patterns and like, the responsibility, what's your responsibility as a designer to like not make kids addicted to your game? Like, there's a lot of interesting questions you can ask around there, but when specifically you're making a game that's trying to tap into people's emotions and develop a narrative experience, it's almost like there's no, you don't technically have a responsibility not to be a dick. You kind of have the choice. It's I think it's important to treat people's emotions and expectations and experiences with respect. Like it's almost like not so much as a responsibility as a designer, but as a human being, it's, if you're asking people to like really get invested emotionally in something, to me, yeah, you do have a responsibility as a human to treat those emotions and that investment with respect, because otherwise you're awful, you know? But I guess there's no like game police who's gonna go around and be like, whoa, you really messed with those kids' emotions, like does that kind of make sense?
I think so. Like, again, just quickly going back to the kind of Last of Us example with part 2, I think in that example, the players had been led into a safe space with those characters, and that safe space was shattered.
Yeah.
And I think in other mediums you can do that, and there's a distance, but in video games,
You're so close to it.
You're so close to it, and that responsibility to tread carefully, it's a very powerful, it's a powerful medium, and it's such a powerful manipulation of that kind of relationship that designers and creators have with players.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And there's like a huge trust element there too, right? Like you can see that I felt so, like my trust was broken so deeply in this experience that, like I said before, I went from loving the franchise to hating it. And like, the next game's coming out like 15 years later, the remaster or whatever, and I'm still like, I don't trust you.
Yeah.
That
100%.
hurt. And I wasn't okay with that.
Yeah.
And I guess you can do that for narrative and stuff sometimes, but it's, maybe that leads into other things of like any friendship or relationship. It's like, would people go back for that? Like, are people willing to make up, or like, will your players trust you again? I don't know. It's kind of interesting to think about it in those terms.
I'm going to change the topic and in a slight kind of 180, because I really want to talk about parkour, because I had no idea you knew anything about parkour, but it turns out you have taught. Please tell me your parkour journey.
Yep. So, parkour was the biggest part of my life before getting into the games industry. I actively practiced parkour for, I don't know, like many years, like a decade or something or more. I don't know. It was a perfect like transitioning from being a kid to an adult movement practice for me, because so much of it was about finding new ways to make your way through obstacles. Or, I used to travel for it, like around Australia to gatherings to train with people. I traveled internationally with it and enjoyed training in like amazing places like in China or Japan, with amazing communities there. And yeah, for long periods of time, I also used to teach it. So I would do workshops or classes for it here in Melbourne. And yeah, I taught a workshop for it in Nepal, where I was doing an art kind of uh almost like an anthropological art art project based on the parkour community in Nepal.
Whoa.
And like it's always funny to me now when I hear people surprised by my parkour path, because for such a long time, like, my friends in uni for my games course would all call me Parkour Penny because of how into it I was. And like for a while I was the vice president of the Australian like organization of parkour. All kinds of things. It was a huge part of my life.
Wow. This is blowing my mind because I mean, my kind of my knowledge of parkour is pretty limited. It is Mirror's Edge, the EA
Yep.
game. I think there was like a French film series, or at least one film I think Luc Besson produced that was all
Yes.
about
Yep.
parkour. And then there were a few other kind of parkoury things. But I occasionally on TikTok will come across ridiculous parkour videos of people running across like rooftops and stuff with GoPros
Yep.
strapped to their head, and I feel terrified and nauseous.
Yep.
Was there someone in your life that inspired you to be interested in parkour? Like, how did you discover it in the first place?
When I was younger, I went through a school holidays where all I did for that entire school holidays was play Guild Wars. But the PvP in Guild Wars, where you don't even get persistent loot. And at that time, doing anything roguelike-y like that was very unheard of. If you didn't have
Yeah.
persistent progress, it was like, what are you doing? You're wasting time. After that school holidays, I kind of woke up and was like, ah, shit. Where did my holidays go? I want to do more with my life and self. I want to have a more balance. I don't want to just be playing games because I don't like my real world. I want to do some of these things for real. And so before parkour, I used to do fencing. And that was
The gift that keeps on giving in terms of surprises.
But that was because my new kind of life philosophy was, I don't want to do these things in games because I can't do them in real life. Like, obviously, I can't cast magic in the real world, but what I can, I really love fantasy and stuff, but what I can do in the real world is learn to sword fight or learn to jump on obstacles and over things and climb and do those amazing motions and do that in real life. And so it's cool that you mentioned Mirror's Edge, because a lot of people obviously kind of get into parkour. Like, I used to teach a lot of beginners classes, and so many people would come to parkour because they love Mirror's Edge or Assassin's Creed, which is fantastic. It's actually it's really interesting to me. One of the interesting things about parkour is that it attracts a lot of people who are interested in non-traditional movement, or like from non-traditional spaces. Like, it's very different from like soccer or football. It's not a team sport. It's individual. It's very much about your own mental state and your own physicality. And as such, you get a lot of people who, again, aren't attracted to traditional sports. So it used to be a bit of an ongoing joke that people in parkour were all just nerds of muscles, because almost no one, especially, I don't know how the scene may have changed since then, but it's all people who play games and they see that and they're like, oh heck, what if I did that? It's just a very different kind of person has traditionally tended towards parkour.
And I think it probably attracts like a lot of people who may not necessarily fit with establishment as well, because it's agility, but it's kind of subverting physicality for other
100%.
purposes. Yeah, it's a really fascinating sport. And I'd be, I mean, I don't think about parkour very often, but now I want to go and find out what's happening with parkour.
Yeah.
And Mirror's Edge was an incredible experience. Like, I get high motion sickness with first person games, but aesthetically, like, it was such a beautiful vision and the movement was so fluid and, really incredible.
So for me, it wasn't a specific video game that was like, go do parkour, but it was more like, this is something that's kind of in all video games, or so many, that I want to do that. And
do you have a favorite movie that features parkour action?
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of the time. Okay. So as parkour got bigger, it's kind of funny that there was suddenly a point where suddenly you'd get like parkour out of nowhere, or like you kind of have when there's a novelty, it's like, all right, and now we have to have a parkour chase scene, and suddenly everyone's doing parkour and it doesn't make sense. But frequently, I like when a little bit of parkour is added to a scene that doesn't just feel like, if it feels natural, or like it kind of makes sense of the character and not just now they can all do it for some reason. Like, the only one I can think of in a film is, I think Captain America does a cat pass over a car in the first Avengers film,
Yep.
like when he's in the city. And it was just really fluid and clean. And I remember being like, nice. Like, that happens a lot in movies where every now and again someone will do a little bit of parkour and I'll be like, oh yeah, they did that. That was technically correct. That was real good.
I have a parkour story that involves movies that I just remembered. When I was in high school, I did work experience at the Australian Film Institute, and it was pretty relaxed when I did that. I was like reading short film scripts and hanging out with people that work there. But while I was working there, Jackie Chan was making a movie in Melbourne called Mr. Nice Guy.
Amazing.
And I somehow got the shooting schedule for the movie because I was working there and it came across my desk. So a friend of mine and I broke into Melbourne Central at night. And when I say broke in, like, it was not that hard to get in.
Yep.
And we watched...
So really, they wanted to get broken into.
We watched Jackie Chan do backflips down the escalators that kind of head to the subway for a good 3 or 4 hours. And he was incredible. And obviously they would shoot it in sections. And the movie was directed by Sammo Hung, who is a legendary Hong Kong action star himself. But just to watch Jackie Chan do that stuff in real life is so like cool. A treasured memory. And I think he really incorporates kind of parkour style into a lot of his filmography as well, especially the police story films. There's like tons of parkour kind of styles where he utilizes the environment. He's like running up stuff, and parkour is awesome.
It's so fun. It's so interesting. I could talk about it for hours.
We've got a couple more games to talk about. So I would love to know, what game was your biggest discovery or biggest surprise?
Yeah, the one that stands out to me most recently, and I'm sure this answer would change depending when you ask me, but it was a puzzle game called Goa Goa. I found it so fascinating because I hadn't heard of it before. And to me, I just kind of bought it on a whim because it was on sale on the Switch store. And I don't play many puzzle games, so maybe it isn't actually, that groundbreaking if you're a puzzle genre aficionado. But you're probably very similar. Being in the industry, we play a lot of games. And a lot of them are very similar, obviously, and that's not a bad thing. A lot of the time it's great, it's familiar, it helps you move between games and genres easily, but sometimes you can get a little bit jaded of like, I play a new game and I can see they did this, and this, and they pulled this from there, and I understand the game. It's very much a known quantity, even if it's new. And again, you just get a little jaded isn't almost the right word, but it's almost a little boring sometimes. It's like there's nothing new, even if the game is still enjoyable or has like twisted things in a novel way. It's still very like par for the course. And this was the first game I just played in a long time that completely shattered that for me, where I hadn't encountered anything like it. It was gorgeous. I found it mind-blowing. Like, I'm probably hyping it up for people who haven't played it now. Like, maybe go in with lower expectations than I'm setting, because this is just from my experience of playing it, that it just completely took me by surprise and kind of really relit a bit of a fire in me for what games could be. And I really love that about it.
What was it specifically? Was it the design of it, or was it the aesthetic, or was it the sound, like, or the combination of all those elements that...
That is a good question. To me, a bit of a combination, like the experience of it, I found very like, whoa, I love this. And the specific, like the sound, the art, all of it comes together in a gorgeous fashion. But what was the thing that really took it away from me is, I guess, it comes down to the design. In that, I remember going to GDC last year, and there was a cool talk by somebody whose name I have no idea off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but she did a talk on what she was identifying. She was identifying a certain experience, and she was labeling it system suspense, and like how to create a new game and what it is. And the idea of it was kind of, in a game, a lot of the time, what keeps you interested in games is the explorations. Like, oh, I wonder if I can do this with this. And a lot of gameplay is like figuring out those limits. Like, if I put the stick in the fire, will it catch on fire? No, it doesn't. Oh, I understand the limitations of this game. But the way she described system suspense was, if you have a game and they're like, I'll try this. You know, what happens if I walk into this wall? You know, like, generally speaking, the answer is you walk into a wall, full stop. But what if you went through the wall? What if there was a secret area there? And all of a sudden, the possibilities, or your expectations are, you don't know what to expect anymore. You know, you thought that walls were just walls, but now walls can be other things. What does that mean? What else could be other things? And all of a sudden, as an experience, you're existing in this possibility space of that's way bigger than you anticipated. And, you know, you're just faced with the excitement of the unknown. And, well, what else can I walk through? And what else can I try? And what else is here? And it's sort of this breaking of expectations by taking something that is either established normally in games or something that's normally a given, and then changing that. And that's what that game did for me. It was, I had a very like, this is what this would mean, this is what that would mean. And then the game in its design was like, but what if you could do this? And to me, that was like, hold the freaking phone. Are you kidding me? Like, that's amazing. What if you could do that? That's wild. Like, that was so against my understanding of, again, just particular systems.
I think you are completely right in that, you know, we obviously play a lot of games, but, you know, like, watch a lot of movies and listen to a lot of music. And when
Yeah.
you find something that redefines what that thing can be, or the possibility of that, it is incredibly special. And I think that's the reason why you want to make things is because, you know, life has a bunch of rules and you kind of just think that's the way it is. But when you discover there's a different way of doing something, especially in the setting of a game,
100%.
you know, that's magic.
I really love the word magic because it really encapsulates that feeling in a very particular way of like, this doesn't make sense to me. You know, this is a whole very childlike kind of very deep response of like, what I think is possible is now maybe not possible, and you're kind of questioning, like, yeah, it's that being presented with the unknown in a way, in a really amazing way. It's very, and what made it better, which is maybe not so good if people ever, you know, they listen to this and like, I'm going to go play Goa Goa. What was so great is that it kind of did hit me out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it, and then bam. So, you know, take that into account if you go play it. But yeah, it's those games that redefine what the thing could be. It's amazing. It's very, very inspirational to me.
I think like I've always had a fascination with like illusionists and magicians and people who can do card tricks, and I really love magician who is no longer with us, but Ricky Jay. He's an actor quite often. Like, he was in a bunch of David Mamet films and Paul Thomas Anderson films, but you know, he is really interesting in terms of looking at illusions and storytelling. And I'm pretty sure he was in a documentary called 52 Pickup, which was him doing card tricks. But there is a through line between illusionists and designers and artists, because you are presenting like exactly what we're talking about, something that doesn't feel possible, that you fully can't necessarily comprehend how it was done, but it gives you the possibility that there is something beyond the veil. And I just find that really powerful as a philosophical idea. And this kind of falls into religion and other elements. But yeah, I just find it really powerful that
Absolutely.
that's kind of the reason why you want to do something, because it is so powerful and it is a form of magic.
I think as well, magic, again, why I like the term, I forgot what I was trying to say halfway through it, but what's so good about it as a term is that it doesn't really happen to you as much as an adult, right?
Yeah.
Because you learn, obviously, you experience things, you know what to expect, and then that feeling of magic and wonder happens less and less and less and less. So I think I love that as a term, because it's not often we get to feel that sense of magic as adults. So when we do get to feel it, it's incredibly special.
I think you need an ever-evolving perspective on the world as you get older, and also like a different understanding of how that sense of illusion changes.
Yeah.
And I think, in the industry that we're in video games, I think over time that industry has become very focused on user testing and optimization and platforms and volume and some of that romantic kind of magic about making experiences. It can over time, especially if you're in an industry for a long time, it can kind of weigh down, but you always need those moments of playing other people's games, to your point, where you go, oh, this is incredible. And you go, oh, this is why I make games too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. That's 100%. It's like what is it? Do what you love, and you'll work every day of your life.
Exactly.
But yeah, as game developers, you like anyone, like you do get affected by it, and sometimes it becomes harder to play games or anything because you've seen behind a curtain and it's all duct tape and
yeah, 100%.
So it's really amazing being able to almost wash off a little bit of that disillusionment and feel that wonder again.
I think we've come to the final boss, which is, asking you what game really changed everything for you and kind of set you on your career path and your focus. What is your final boss game? Yeah,
for final boss, there's a few different ones that do feel like that to me. Like I mentioned Guild Wars before because it really shifted my perspective of how I wanted to live as a human. Like I didn't just want to be hiding in games. I wanted to be out there experiencing as much of them as I could. But that to me is just another example of why The Sims is one of my biggest answers to this question of like the games that have really impacted me and affected my life. Is that I'm diagnosed autistic, which I didn't know for a very long time, but I bring that up mainly because part of what that has meant for me, especially growing up, is that often I don't understand a lot of things. From its basic level, there's a lot about being alive or other people and things that just have made absolutely no sense and have been really hard to figure out over time, even if I didn't fully understand how much I was struggling at times.
Yeah.
And what The Sims has meant to me, that I didn't realize so much at first, was that, obviously it's a life simulator and you're playing out, various relationships and families and you're building, and it's beautiful and creative, and there's so many different parts of it that you can enjoy and love. And I grew up playing it like a lot of people. But for me, what I got out of The Sims so much, and other games to an extent as well, but because The Sims is obviously so focused on families and people and aspirations and human things, it gave me ways to understand the world that I was living in that I didn't have before. So something that would happen really frequently and less so over time, but still happens a lot, is something would happen in real life and I'd be like, oh, that's just like in The Sims where X, Y, Z. And I have a heap of different examples of that. But at the end of the day, what that kind of was for me was, here are these things in the real world that I don't necessarily understand or even if I don't understand it because just regular, it's a new experience, sometimes games have practiced those scenarios with me, and I can understand these scenarios through the lens of the game. Or I can understand what this relationship concept means because it was demonstrated in The Sims. And that makes sense to me, even if this doesn't. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and I think that is the most kind of insightful take on The Sims that I've heard. I obviously worked on The Sims like you did, but I didn't grow up playing those kind of games, and I didn't understand why people played them because I didn't come from that background. But hearing you talk about, that experience through a neurodiverse lens is incredibly powerful because I'd never thought of it that way. But the way you've explained it, I mean, it makes sense. Is this something you've kind of looked into yourself to see if people have had similar experiences, people who are on the spectrum with The Sims?
I feel like it's almost a given. I haven't looked into it specifically, but obviously having worked on it and having been a big fan of it and just generally being a nerd, you see so many people around you enjoying it, engaging with it because they can tell these very unique stories to them,
Yeah.
And so much of Sims as a brand, especially now and stuff, is about, it's LGBT plus positive. It's being able to express who you are regardless of, body or this or that. And I think a lot of people who are drawn to The Sims is drawn to it because they're able to express who they are or try out versions of themselves in a game in a very safe way that they can't necessarily do elsewhere.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that personal role playing in it. Yeah.
I think as the world is kind of changing and evolving now, and it kind of feels like it's going backwards in a lot of ways. and I think it's incredibly important to have those spaces where people can come together in those constants, because it's constants as well, like a space, if you're queer, if you're neurodiverse, if you're different, or you want a space that you can rely on. And I don't know, it feels like the world at times recently feels unreliable. And I think you've made me look at The Sims in a different way.
No, that makes me happy. Some of the systems in it that are kind of examples. One of the ones that I think about a lot is I think it was in either Sims 2 or 3. It was the way they designed relationship systems, in that there were two, when you're making friends with another Sim, it would have 2 bars to demonstrate your relationship. And the first one was essentially your relationship with the person at that point in time. And the second one was about your relationship with that person over a long period of time, like the lifetime of your relationship. And it was really cool because before, the classic thing that can happen in a lot of life Sims is that, you've just started a game, you start talking to the other Sim, and then by dinner time, you're married, and your Sims have a kid. It moves really fast. But you couldn't actually do that in this game. And to some extent, yes, but you could max out the top bar immediately because you're having like the best time with this person, and your Sims are dancing and having a great whatever. But you're only a new friend, so the lifetime bar is still at like a 1 or a 2 out of 100. And those things being disconnected from each other was really, really helpful to me in a variety of situations to understand that, like both in relationships with other people, like the idea of like the in the moment one, and maybe the in the moment one has gone to 0 because you haven't spoken to each other in years, but the bottom one is still at 96 out of 100 because you're still best friends and you've had this deep history together. And that also helped with mood a lot of the time to describe how I'm feeling to people, especially when I was dealing with a lot more like depressive symptoms and things like that. The way I would kind of describe it when they ask, how are you doing? It's like, in this moment, I am feeling one way, but I also have this other layer, and that's the problem. That's the one that's always at like 2 out of 100, and I don't know why, because the top layer, I actually feel great right now. I'm at 100,
Yeah.
And being able to find, like, that kind of thing would happen a lot. Like, different systems in The Sims would give me the vocabulary and the ways of thinking about feelings and things and relationships to be able to express them to other people, or even just understand them.
Yeah, I mean, wow. It makes a lot of sense. And I think, there is those layers of complexities, but those constants and having, like, exactly as you're describing, it makes a lot of sense. But again, I personally feel like I never thought of it through that lens.
Yeah.
And I probably didn't appreciate The Sims enough in terms of through that kind of perspective. And I always thought about it in like a very clinical, like perspective of,
Yeah.
I don't know, like a life simulator. Like,
Yeah.
I'm living life. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yep.
I never really felt those connections, but I think in obviously kind of looking through the lens of community and seeing the impact of that. And I also think probably personally seeing, like, working on the business side of it as well is a very different experience. But
Absolutely.
Games are played by humans, and those human experiences are the key to what matters about making games. Or at the end of the day, nothing else matters.
I do want to share another story, if that's okay.
Yeah.
This one's not Sims, but it's, to me, another really interesting example of, I guess, the impact of systems or the impact of design choices, which as a designer is something that's, I think about a lot. Or this is one of the early examples I can think of that really made me start thinking more about, like, what does the player experience actually mean, and what is design and all of that, like we were talking about before. And Animal Crossing is another game that, I don't know if it's just simulation games that do this more to me than others, but Animal Crossing also had a similar, like, very big teaching experience in a way that I didn't expect, which is in the previous Animal Crossing games, and I think it might be a bit different now. In Animal Crossing, you have a little town and villagers come and live in your town. And then sometimes, much to the horror of me as a young child, sometimes the villagers move out. And sometimes there's not a dang thing you can do about it. And that, to me, in retrospect, now that I'm past the emotional roller coaster, is so fascinating, because going through that for the first time as a child, like, again, young person, extremely bonding. I bond to everything immediately. Like, with my whole heart, I love this person or this character. And then having what I see is, like, my little digital best friend be like, all right, I'm moving out, bye, broke my heart in a way. And, like, having to learn to say goodbye and having nothing that I could do to change that outcome was actually, like, maybe it's on one hand, I'm like, yes, I was blessed to be able to model, like, at that point in my childhood, I hadn't experienced, like, huge loss that, this experience in the video game was very real to me. And it modeled a lot of those feelings of, like, what it's like to have a dear friend to you, or something like that, move away. And that feeling of loss and learning to cope with those feelings of loss felt, they were real. And then when I had to deal with those feelings in the real world with, like, real people moving away or, similar things, and saying goodbye to people, I remember very specifically being struck by that and, like, feeling these feelings and being like, I know these I've felt these before, but from Animal Crossing, which on one hand, I'm sure there's people out there who's like, wow, you're really devaluing your relationship with those people by comparing the loss of them to the loss of these digital pixels. But to me, they were both real. And it gave me a space to, in a way, practice those emotions and understand how to move through loss and saying goodbye through this game before I had to deal with it as much in real life.
Yeah. It's also probably the recognition of a true thing as well. Like, you were affected by it in the game because you kind of felt there would be a truth to it. and then it kind of helped you cope or understand in reality.
Yeah.
I can't remember if we were talking about this the other day, but I was telling a story about my daughter and son watching the cartoon Robot Dreams, which is a fantastic adaptation of a graphic novel about a dog who gets a robot friend in the city, and they have all these adventures, and then they get separated, and there's a journey. And this is spoilers for Robot Dreams. But at the end of the film, like, the dog's so down, he's been looking for his robot friend everywhere, and he's on a rooftop or he's in his apartment, and he looks out the window, and he can see his robot down below, and he's like, heart sings. He's like trying to wave to the robot. And then he notices the robot has a new dog friend, and he's like, heart sinks, and it goes into like the dog's mind, and the dog's imagining all the happy times he had with his robot. And then the dog is like, he doesn't want to go down and disturb the robot because he wants the robot to be happy.
That is heartbreaking. I would have bawled my eyes out more than Detective Pikachu.
My daughter,
wow,
does not emotionally. My daughter is neurodiverse. Does not emotionally react to anything. This destroyed her.
Yep.
And she was so angry with me because she recognized that was a true thing. You know what I mean? And she knew it, right, instinctively. And I think that was the point. And I think it's probably a similar thing with Animal Crossing. Like, when you recognize that in a piece of art and you know it's a true thing, you instinctively, you know it, and it hurts because you recognize it. And
absolutely.
It's the power of media, power of video games, power of movies.
100%. Oh, man, I'm going to be thinking about that dog.
You should watch Robot Dreams. It is incredible. Like,
oh, boy.
But it's painful. Heads up.
It's duly warned.